The coffee at Maplewood General had never been good, and on the morning that changed everything, it was worse than usual. Raymond Keele noticed the burnt smell before he even reached the vending machine at the end of the hallway. He dropped in his coins anyway, watched the paper cup fill with something the color of weak rust, and carried it back to the waiting area the way he always did, without complaint, without ceremony. He had been doing that for 6 hours, sitting in the same plastic chair near the window that overlooked the parking structure, watching the sky go from black to gray to a pale, waterlogged blue that passed for morning in November in northern Ontario. He was 53 years old. He wore a plaid flannel shirt that had been washed so many times, the pattern had softened into something approximate, and work boots that were clean but clearly accustomed to not being clean. His hands were large and still. He did not scroll through his phone. He did not pace. He just sat there in the way that men who have spent decades working with their hands tend to sit, present in their bodies, not making a performance of patience, simply having it. Nobody paid him much attention. That was fine. That was how most of his life had gone. It was the sound that reached him first, not loud. More like the controlled pressure of someone trying not to make a sound and not entirely succeeding. He looked up from his cup. Across the waiting room, partially obscured by a pillar, a woman sat in a wheelchair near the admissions desk. She was maybe 40, maybe younger. Dark hair pulled back in a way that looked like it had started the day as something intentional and come partially undone. She was holding a phone to her ear, and whoever was on the other end was making her grip it tighter and tighter until Raymond could see the whitening across her knuckles from where he sat. "I understand that," she said. Her voice was low and even, the kind of even that cost something. "But I'm asking you to delay it. Just 72 hours. I'm at a hospital. My mother." She stopped, listened. The line between her eyebrows deepened. "I see. No, I understand." She lowered the phone. Did not hang up, just lowered it to her lap and sat for a moment with her eyes closed and her jaw set in a way that Raymond recognized. Not grief, not yet, but the thing that lives just before grief, the moment where a person is deciding what they're made of. A nurse came by with a clipboard, spoke to her briefly, and left. The woman nodded as though she had heard, though Raymond doubted she had. Then she tried to wheel herself toward the corridor and caught her wheel on the edge of the floor mat, the raised rubber lip that someone had placed there to keep the mat from sliding, and stopped and tried again and stopped again. Raymond set down his coffee. He crossed the waiting room. He crouched down beside the wheel without announcement, freed the rubber trim that had caught in the spokes, and stood back up. "Thank you," she said. She looked at him with the mild wariness that a woman alone in a hospital at 6 in the morning has every right to feel about a stranger who approaches without warning. "Matt gets everybody," Raymond said. He gestured toward the floor. "They should fix it." "Yes," she said. "They should." He returned to his chair. She wheeled herself into the corridor and disappeared. He thought that was the end of it. Her name, as he would learn later, was Elise Garneau. Not that it would have meant anything to him in that moment, though it would have meant something to most people in the country. Garneau Capital. Garneau Foundation. The woman whose face had been on the cover of a business magazine 3 years running, who had rebuilt a failing resource company into something that employed 12,000 Canadians from Sudbury to Fort McMurray, who had, quietly and without press release, funded 3 rural hospitals in underserviced communities, including, it would eventually occur to Raymond with a particular kind of irony, the one he was sitting in right now. None of that was visible in the way she sat in the early morning light of Maplewood General's waiting room. What was visible was that she was exhausted and frightened and trying not to show either. Raymond was there because of his father, Clifford Keele, 79, who had been brought in the night before after a fall in his kitchen in Elk Lake, 4 hours north. Raymond had driven through the night without stopping. The doctor said it was the hip, possibly the shoulder, definitely a concussion that needed watching. They said he was stable. Raymond had thanked them and returned to his chair by the window because there was nothing else to do, and he did not know how to do nothing somewhere else. He had a company, technically, Keele Contracting, which operated out of a converted garage behind his house in Hearst, and which, in its 28-year existence, had built or renovated 46 structures across northern Ontario, including 2 schools, a fire hall, a community center, and more private homes than he had ever bothered to count. He had 3 full-time employees and a rotating crew of subcontractors and a reputation, in the communities where it mattered, for showing up exactly when he said he would and doing exactly what he had agreed to do, without drama, without shortcuts, without invoicing for things that hadn't been needed. He was not a rich man. He was not a poor man. He was the kind of man who existed in the practical middle distance of things, noticed mainly in his absence. He had a daughter named Petra, who was 12, and who was staying with his sister in Hearst while he was gone. He had called Petra at 6 that morning, before she was awake, and left a voicemail that said Grandpa was going to be okay, and he would be home as soon as he could, and not to eat all of Aunt Susan's granola bars, because Susan bought them specifically to portion out across the week, and it caused real friction in the house when the supply was disrupted. Petra had texted back, "Dad, I know about the granola bars. This is a known situation." He had smiled at that, set the phone face down on his knee, and gone back to watching the window. He saw Elise again at 8:30, near the cafe that opened at the east end of the ground floor. She had a tray balanced across the arms of her wheelchair, 2 cups of coffee on it, and she was trying to navigate a sharp corner near the entrance while keeping the tray level. It was not going well. The tray was tilting. Raymond reached her in time to catch the second cup before it went over. "I had it," she said, reflexively. "You almost had it," he said, and handed the cup back. She looked at him for a moment. Then something shifted in her face, not softening exactly, more like an adjustment. "You were in the waiting room earlier." "Still am, technically. Family? Father. Hip yours?" "Mother," she said. "Stroke." She said the word the way people say things they have been saying all night and can no longer hear properly. They're saying she's stable. But stable is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Raymond nodded. He understood the grammar of that. The way medical language could build a very large room out of a very small word. "There's a table over there," he said, "near the window if you want company. You don't have to." She looked at the table. She looked at him again with that same careful consideration. Then she maneuvered her chair toward it, and Raymond followed. They sat with their coffees. Neither of them spoke for a little while, and that was fine. Raymond was not uncomfortable with silence. He had spent too many years in it to fear it. "Better than the vending machine," she said eventually. "Low bar." She almost smiled. "Raymond," he said, and offered his hand across the table. "Elise." She shook it. Her grip was firm. It was the handshake of someone who had learned early that people took you less seriously if you didn't make them feel the full fact of your presence. "What do you do, Raymond?" "Construction. Northern Ontario, mostly. You?" She seemed to consider how to answer that. "Business," she said. "That covers some ground." "It does," she agreed, and that was all for a while. They drank their coffee. A porter wheeled an empty bed through the corridor. A family of 4 came through the main doors, stamping snow off their boots, the youngest one crying in a muffled, half-asleep way. Elise watched them. Raymond watched his coffee. "Your father," she said. Is he local? Elk Lake. North of here. He's been up there 30 years. My mother grew up there." "He stayed after she passed. He didn't want to move closer to you?" Raymond thought about how to put this. "He's not much of a mover," he said. "He knows everybody up there. The postmaster, the fellows at the curling club, the 2 mechanics in town. He knows both of them. That's a whole world. You can't just pick that up and put it down somewhere else." Elise was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. "I suppose you can't." He had the sense she was thinking about something specific. He didn't ask. It wasn't his business, and he had not stayed alive 53 years by making other people's business his own without invitation. He was back in the waiting room when the man arrived. He came through the front entrance at 9:15, dressed in the kind of coat that was purchased specifically to communicate things about the person wearing it. He was maybe 45, gym-built, with close-cropped silver hair and the confidence of someone who moved through spaces expecting them to rearrange. He spoke to the front desk without waiting, using a name, Elise Garneau, and a tone that implied possession. Raymond watched him cross to the corridor and disappear. He had no reason to think about it further. It was not his business. He was here for his father. He picked up a magazine he had no interest in and turned a page he did not read. 3 minutes later, Elise's wheelchair came around the corner at a speed that suggested she was not heading somewhere so much as leaving it. She stopped near the window. Her face was composed, but barely. She was holding her phone again, both hands this time, and her knuckles had gone white the same way they had that morning. Raymond set down the magazine. "You all right?" he said. She looked at him like she had forgotten he was there, and then like she was recalculating something quickly. "That man," she said. "From the lobby. I noticed him. He's on the board of a company I'm dealing with. He found out I was here. I don't know how he found out. He's been trying to get me to sign off on a land sale. In northeastern Ontario. Timber rights, mostly, and some mineral access. There's a community up there, small, First Nations, been there a long time. The sale would effectively remove their access to traditional territory." She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "He came here, to a hospital, to pressure me into signing while my mother is in the ICU. Raymond was quiet for a moment. He was looking at the corridor where the man had gone. "Did you tell him to leave?" he said. "I told him this wasn't the time. That's not the same thing." She looked at him. "You want him to leave," Raymond said. "You have to tell him to leave. Not that it's inconvenient, that it's over, that you're not signing. It's more complicated than that. He has proxies on the board. If I make an enemy of him today, he can move against 3 other initiatives that I—" "Elise." He said her name plainly, without urgency, the way he might identify a load-bearing wall to a homeowner before explaining why they couldn't knock it down. "Do you want to sign that agreement?" "No, then that's the answer. Everything else is a different problem." She stared at him. There was something flickering in her expression that he could not fully identify. It might have been irritation, or it might have been recognition. He had seen both look similar on people who had been told something they already knew. The man in the expensive coat appeared at the end of the corridor. He saw Elise and started toward her, adjusting his expression into something that was meant to look reasonable. Raymond stood up. He was not a large man. He was not imposing in any particular way. He was just a 53-year-old contractor from Hearst, Ontario, standing in a hospital waiting room in a flannel shirt, and there was something about the simple fact of him standing that made the man in the expensive coat slow his approach. "She's asked you to leave," Raymond said. "This is a hospital. Her mother is upstairs. You need to go." The man's reasonable expression shifted into something with more texture. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Nobody," Raymond said, "which means I don't have a position to protect." "Now leave." There was a pause. The kind of pause where a room holds itself still. The man looked from Raymond to Elise and back again, performing a rapid assessment of what leverage existed here, and apparently finding less than he expected, because after another moment he straightened his coat and walked back toward the entrance. Elise watched him go. She did not say anything immediately. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. "You're right," Raymond said, and sat back down. He picked up the magazine again. His father, Clifford, woke up properly at 11 and was confused about why Raymond was there, because the last thing he remembered was making himself tea. Raymond explained about the fall, about the ambulance, about the hip and the shoulder and the concussion. Clifford listened with the expression of a man hearing news about someone he was mildly irritated at. "Damn kitchen floor," Clifford said. "I've been meaning to put something down." "I'll put something down," Raymond said. "You've been saying that since last January. I'll put it down this week. When you're home." Clifford studied his son for a moment. "You drove through the night. Roads were clear. Raymond?" "It's fine, Dad. Go to sleep." Clifford went to sleep. Raymond sat beside the bed in a chair that was slightly too small for him and felt the tiredness arrive now that there was nowhere else for it to go. He had been keeping it at bay for 14 hours, with the particular discipline of people who do not stop, because stopping would mean acknowledging the thing they are frightened of. His father looked small in the bed. He had never looked small before. That was the thing nobody warned you about with parents. Not the decline itself, but the way it arrived without announcement, the way you looked up one day and found the geography of a person had changed. He thought about what Elise had said, about knowing everyone in a place, about a whole world that couldn't be picked up and put down somewhere else. He looked at his father's hand on the blanket, the knuckles swollen slightly from years of work, the skin looser now than it used to be. He stayed. He ran into her again in the corridor that afternoon. She was coming from the ICU. Her eyes were redder than they had been, but her posture was deliberate, the kind of upright that people maintain when they need their body to do the emotional work their mind is too tired to manage. "How is she?" he asked. The same as an hour ago, and as yesterday." She said it without bitterness. Just said, with the accuracy of someone reporting conditions. "How's your father?" "Awake, annoyed. Good signs." Something in her face loosened slightly. That's a good sign. They were standing in a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, and neither of them had anywhere else to be, and so they stood there for a moment the way people do in hospitals, stripped of the usual social architecture, with no agenda available except the simple fact of one another. "That man," she said. "He called my assistant this afternoon. What did he say?" "That he had spoken to me. That we had reached an understanding." She shook her head. "We had not reached an understanding." Raymond said nothing. "I'm going to decline the agreement," Elise said. "I was going to before, I just hadn't." She paused. "I was managing too many things at once. I was letting it stay unresolved because resolving it would create another problem, and I was already dealing with the problems I had." She looked at the corridor wall as though it had something to say. "My mother always said I was good at solving problems but slow at ending them." Sounds like a smart woman. Elise looked at him. "She is," she said, present tense, with the firmness of someone who needed that verb to stay where it was. "She's still there," Raymond said. "That's what stable means." The silence between them was different from the morning's silence. The morning's silence had been the silence of strangers sharing proximity. This one had a different quality. Familiar was too strong a word, but it was something adjacent to it. It was the silence of people who had watched each other in an unguarded moment and had not looked away. "I don't usually talk to people like this," Elise said. "Like what?" She seemed to search for the word. "Normally." Then, as if correcting herself, directly. "Without a layer, hospital tends to do that." "Yes," she said. "I suppose it does." His father was transferred to a step-down unit on the third day, which meant things were going in the right direction. Raymond slept properly for the first time, 4 hours in the chair beside the bed, and woke up with a crick in his neck and Clifford watching him from the bed with an expression of fond exasperation. "You should go home," Clifford said. "Petra needs her father." "Petra is fine. Susan's there. Susan feeds her quinoa. Quinoa is fine. Quinoa is what food eats when food is on a diet." Clifford shifted carefully against his pillows. "Go home, Raymond. I'm not going anywhere." Raymond rubbed his neck. He thought of Petra, who had texted him 17 times in 3 days, mostly memes and observations about the granola bar situation, but also, twice, things that had made him understand she was 12 and her grandfather was in the hospital, and she was holding it together the way he had taught her to, which sometimes meant he had taught her too well. "I'll come back next weekend," Raymond said. "Drive you home when they release you. I can arrange a Dad." He said it the same way Clifford had said his name 3 days before, just the name, just the word. Clifford stopped. He found Elise near the main entrance, in her coat, a bag across her lap. She looked better than she had. Not rested, nobody in a hospital looked rested, but less brittle. "You're leaving?" he said. "Just for a few hours, from the hotel. My assistant is flying in to help manage the..." She made a gesture that seemed to encompass a great quantity of unspecified problems, the ongoing situations, the agreement, among other things. She looked at him. "You?" "Going home, back next weekend for my dad." She nodded. Outside, through the glass doors, it was snowing lightly, the kind of snow that fell without conviction, more an atmosphere than a weather event. "Raymond," she said. He turned. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to understand that it's a real question and not..." She stopped. She was choosing her words with more care than she usually applied, which he found interesting given that she had seemed to him a woman for whom words were generally tools deployed with precision. "I have a project, up near Moose Factory, a community services building. The contract was awarded to a firm out of Toronto, and they've been..." She paused. "It's not going well. The build is 6 weeks behind. There are concerns about how they've been engaging with the local community. I need someone who knows how to work in the North, who understands what that actually requires." Raymond was quiet. "I'm not asking for a favor," she said. "It would be a proper contract, competitive rate. But I'm also not going to pretend I would be calling your company if I hadn't met you here." She said it levelly, without apology. "I want to be transparent about that." He considered this. He thought about his crew, and the timeline they were already managing, and the fact that Moose Factory was not Hearst, but it was the kind of place he had worked before. The North having its own logic that required being learned before you could be useful in it. "I'd need to see the scope," he said. "Of course. and talk to the community contacts directly before I say yes to anything. That's what I'd want, she said. He nodded slowly. Send me what you have. She reached into the bag on her lap and produced a card. Plain, cream-colored, her name on it and nothing else. He took it. How's your mother? He said. Responding, Elise said. The word arrived with something in it that was not quite hope but was in that general direction. They moved her this morning. They think she may be responding to the medication. She looked at the floor for a moment, then back up. I keep thinking about what you said. That stable means she's still there. She is. Yes. Yes. She straightened. She is. He drove home through the snow thinking about his father's hands on the blanket, and Petra's granola bar commentary and the way all the people working on it understood what they were building toward and why. He thought about the community near Moose Factory and what it meant to have contractors come in from 3 provinces away who had not taken the trouble to understand the place they were building in, who treated the North as a logistics problem rather than a context. He thought about Elise Garneau, who had sat across a cafeteria table from him in a flannel shirt and told him things in a way she said she didn't usually tell people things, and who had a card that said only her name because it was enough. He called Petra from the highway, hands-free, the truck solid beneath him on the icy road. Grandpa's okay, he said. I'm heading home. I know, she said. You texted. 7 times. That's not 7 times, Dad. I have receipts. How far away are you? 2 hours. Maybe 2.5 if the 11 is iced up. Okay. A pause. Dad? Yeah. The granola bar situation has escalated. Define escalated. Aunt Susan bought the ones with coconut now and nobody asked for that. I'll be home in 2 hours, he said. We'll sort it out. He heard her small, real laugh on the other end of the line. He drove north through the falling dark, the headlights of the truck cutting a clean line through the snow, the road opening ahead of him, familiar and white, and requiring nothing from him except to keep going. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at Keele Contracting, not to his email, but an actual letter, in an actual envelope, addressed in handwriting that was angular and precise. He read it standing at his kitchen counter before the coffee had finished. Elise's mother had been moved to a rehabilitation facility. She was speaking again, not clearly, not fully, but speaking. She was going to need a long recovery and the outcome was uncertain, but she was fighting in the way that Elise described as characteristically inconvenient to the people around her, which Raymond understood to be the highest form of praise her daughter knew how to give. The Moose Factory project had been restructured. The Toronto firm had been released from the contract after a formal review. Keele Contracting had been identified as the successor. The scope was substantial, more substantial than he had anticipated based on their conversation, and the community liaison coordinator had already been in touch with 2 elders from the band who wanted to speak with whoever was running the build before a single tool was unloaded. He had expected the first part of that. He had not fully anticipated how right it would feel. The letter also said something that he read twice, not because he hadn't understood it, but because he wanted to be certain he had. I have worked with a great many people in the course of building things. What I have found is that the ones who ask to talk to the community before they unload their tools are rarely the ones who cause the damage. You asked. That mattered. He folded the letter along its original creases and set it on the counter beside his coffee cup. Through the kitchen window, the yard was deep in snow, the garage roof white with it, the single outdoor light making a small bright circle on the ground below. He picked up his phone, found her number, which she had sent separately, practically, as a follow-up to the card. Typed. Letter received. I'll talk to the elders first. That's how it should go. He set the phone down without waiting for a reply. From down the hall, he could hear Petra in her room, the particular sound of a 12-year-old who has woken before she meant to and is trying to decide whether it's worth it. He poured 2 cups of coffee, carried one down the hall, knocked twice. It's too early, she said. It's 7:15. That's what I said. He left the coffee on the floor outside her door and went back to the kitchen and stood in the particular quiet of a November morning in northern Ontario, the kind of quiet that had texture to it, the kind that wasn't the absence of things but the presence of them, waiting. His phone lit up on the counter. That's exactly how it should go, the message said. Thank you, Raymond. He picked up his own coffee, looked at the window. The snow was still coming down, soft and steady, the way it did up here. not making a spectacle of itself, just doing what it had come to do.